Section 21 of the Wit and Humor of America, Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Joe Mabry. Colonel Sterrett's Panther Hunt by Alfred Henry Lewis. Panthers, what we all calls mountain lions, observed the old cattleman, wearing meanwhile the sapient air of him who feels equipped of his subject, is plenty furtive, not to say mighty sedulous to skulk. That's why a gent don't meet up with more of 'em while pirootin' about in the hills. Them cats hears 'em, or they sees 'em, and him still ignorant thereof, and with that they bashfully withdraws. Which it's to be urged in favor of mountain lions that they never forces themse'fs on no gent. They're shore considerate, that-a-way, and special of themse'fs. If one's ever hurt, you can bet it won't be a accident. However, it ain't for me to go around impugnin' the motives of no mountain lion, partic'lar when the entire tribe is strangers to me complete. But still a love of truth compels me to concede that if mountain lions ain't cowardly, they're shore cautious a lot. Cattle and calves they passes up as too bellicose, and none of 'em ever faces any animal more warlike than a baby colt or maybe a half-grown deer. I'm ridin' along the Caliente once when I hears a crashin' in the bushes on the bluff above. 200 foot high she is, and as sheer as the walls of this yere tavern. As I lifts my eyes, I fear frenzied mare and colt comes chargin' up and projects themse'fs over the precipice and lands in the valley below. They're dead as Julius Caesar when I rides onto 'em while a brace of mountain lions is skirtin' up and down the aidge of the bluff they leaps from, mewin' and lashin' their long tails in hot enthusiasm. Shore the cats has been chasin' the mare and foal, and they locos 'em to that extent they don't know where they're headin' and makes the death jump I relates. I bangs away with my 6-shooter, but beyond givin' the mountain lions a convulsive start, I can't say I does any execution. They turn and goes streakin' it through the pine woods like a drunkard to a barn raisin'. Timid? Shore. They're that timid, seminary girls compared to 'em is as sternly courageous as a passel of buccaneers. Out in Mitchell's Canyon a couple of the Lee Scott riders cuts the trail of a mountain lion and her 2 kittens. Now, whatever do you all reckon this old tabby does? Basely deserts her offsprings without even barin' a tooth, and the cowpunchers takes 'em gently by their tails and beats out their juvenile brains. That's straight. That mother lion goes swarmin' up the canyon like she ain't got a minute to live, and you can gamble the limit that where a animal sees its children perish without frontin' up for war, it don't possess the commonest rudiments of sand. Sech, son, is mountain lions. It's one evenin' in the red light when Colonel Sterrett, who's got through his day's toil on that coyote paper he's editor of, unfolds concernin' a panther roundup which he pulls off in his youth. "This panther hunt," says Colonel Sterrett, as he fills his 3rd tumbler, "occurs when mighty likely I'm goin' on 17 winters. I'm a leader among my young companions at the time. In fact, I allers is. And I'm proud to say that my supremacy that-a-way is due to the dominant character of my intellects. I'm ever bright and sparklin' as a child, and I recalls how my aptitude for learnin' promotes me to be regarded as the smartest lad in my set. If thar's visitors to the school, or if the selectman invades that academy to sort o' size us up, the teacher allers plays me on 'em. I'd go to the front for the outfit, which I'm wont on sech harrowin' occasions to recite a ode, the teacher's done wrote it himse'f, and which is entitled Napoleon's Mad Career. Thar's 24 stanzas to it, and while these interlopin' selectmen sets thar lookin' owly and sagacious, I'd wallop loose with the 24 verses, stampin' up and down, and accompanying said recitations with sech a multitude of reckless gestures, it comes plenty close to backin' everybody plumb out'n the room. Yere's the first verse: I drinkin', swarin', rarin', tarrin', fallin' down in the mud, while the yearth for 40 miles about is kivered with my blood. You all can see from that speciment that our schoolmaster ain't simply flirtin' with the muses when he originates that epic. No, sir, he means business, and whenever I throws it into the selectmen I does it justice. The trustees used to silently line out for home when I finishes, and never a yeep. It stuns 'em. It shore fills 'em to the brim. As I gazes rareward, goes on the Colonel, as by one rapt impulse he uplifts both his eyes and his nose paint. As I gazes rareward, I says, on them sun-filled days, and special if ever I gets betrayed into talkin' about 'em, I can hardly tire myself from the subject. I explains yeretofore that not only by inclination but by birth I'm a sure enough 'ristocrat. This captaincy of local fashion I assumes at a tender age. I wears the record as the first child to don shoes throughout the entire summer in that neighborhood, and many a time and oft does my youthful but envy-eaten compeers lambaste me for the insultin' innovation. But I sticks to my moccasins, and today shoes in the blue grass is almost as universal as the liquor habit. Thar dawns a hour, however, when my position in the van of Kaintucky ton comes within a ace of bein' seriously shook. It's on my way to school one dewy mornin' when I gets involved all inadvertent in a onhappy rupture with a polecat. I never does know how the misunderstandin' starts. After all, the seeds of said dispute is by no means important. It's enough to say that polecat finally has me thoroughly convinced. Followin' the difference in my defeat, I'm witless enough to keep goin' on to school, whereas I should have returned homeward and cast myself upon my parents as a sacred trust. Of course, when I'm in school I don't go impartin' my troubles to the other chil'en. I emulates the heroism of the Spartan boy who stands to be eat by a fox and keeps 'em to myself. But the views of my late enemy is not to be smothered. They appeals to my young companions, who tharupon puts up a most onneedful riot of coughin's and sneezin's, but nobody knows me as the party who's so pungent. It's a tryin' moment. I can see that, once I'm located, I'm goin' to be as unpopular as a bar in a hog pen. I'll come tumblin' from my pinnacle in that proud community as the glass of fashion and the mold of form. You can go your bottom peso, the thought causes me to feel plenty perturbed. At this peril I has a inspiration, as good, too, as I ever entertains without the aid of rum. I determines to cast the opprobrium on some other boy and send the hunt of general indignation sweepin' along his trail. Thar's a innocent infant who's a student at this temple of childish learnin', and his name is Riley Bark. This Riley is one of them giant children who's only 12 and weighs 300 pounds. And in proportions as Riley is a son of Anak physical, he's dwarfed mental. He ain't half as well upholstered with brains as a shepherd dog. That's right, Riley's intellects is like a fly in a saucer of syrup. They struggles round plumb slow. I decides to uplift Riley to the public eye as the felon who's disturbin' that seminary's serenity. Comin' to this decision, I p'ints at him where he's planted 4 seats ahead, all tangled up in a spellin' book, and says in a loud whisper to a child who's sittin' next, "Throw him out!" That's enough. No gent will ever realize how easy it is to direct a people's sentiment ontil he takes a whirl at the game. In 2 minutes, by the teacher's bull's-eye copper watch, every soul knows it's pore Riley, and in 3 the teacher's done drug Riley outdoors by the ha'r of his head and chased him home. Gents, I look back on that youthful feat as a triumph of diplomacy. It shore saved my standin' as the Beau Brummel of the blue grass. Good old days, them, observes the Colonel mournfully, and one's never to come agin. My sternest studies is romances, and the perusals of old tales as I tells you all prior fills me full of moss and mockingbirds in equal parts. I reads deep of Walter Scott and waxes to be a sharp on Moslems special. I dreams of the siege of Acre and Richard the Lionheart, and I simply can't sleep nights for honin' to hold a tournament and joust a whole lot for some fair lady's love. Once I commits the error of my career by joustin' with my brother Jeff. This year Jeff is settin' on the bank of the branch fishin' for bullpouts at the time, and Jeff don't know I'm hoverin' near at all. Jeff's reedick'lous fond of fishin', which he'd sooner fish than read Paradise Lost. I'm romancin' along, similarly bent, when I notes Jeff perched on the bank. To my boyish imagination Jeff at once turns to be a paynim. I drops my bait box, couches my fish pole, and emittin' a impromptu war cry, charges him. It's the work of a moment. Jeff's unhossed and falls into the branch. But thar's bitterness to follow victory. Jeff emerges like Diana from the bath and frails the wamos off me with a club. Talk of puttin' a crimp in folks. Gents, when Jeff's wrath is assuaged, I'm all on one side like the Leanin' Tower of Pisa. Jeff actually confers a scourgy to my spinal column. A week later, my folks takes me to a doctor. That practitioner puts on his specs and looks me over with jealous care. "Whatever's wrong with him, Doc?" says my father. "Nothin'," says the physician, "only your son William's 5 inches out of plumb." Then he rigs a contraption made up of guy ropes and stay laths, and I has to wear it, and maybe in 3 or 4 weeks or so he's got me warped back into the perpendickler. "But how about this cat hunt?" asked Dan Boggs, "which I don't aim to be intrusive none, but I'm camped yere through the second drink waitin' for it, and these procrastinations is makin' me kind of batty." "That panther hunt is like this," says the colonel, turnin' to Dan. "At the age of 17, me and 8 or 9 of my intimate brave comrades founds what we all denominates as the Chevy Chase Huntin' Club. Each of us maintains a passel of odds and ends of dogs, and at stated intervals we convenes on hosses, and with these 80 curs at our tails goes yellin' and scallyhootin' up and down the countryside, allowin' we're shore a band of Nimrods. The Chevy Chasers ain't been and been as a institootion over long when chance opens a gate to serious work. The deep snows in the eastern mountains, it looks like, has done drove a panther into our neighborhood. You could hear of him on all sides. Folks glimpses him now and then. They allows he's about the size of a yearlin' calf, and the way he pulls down sech feeble people as sheep or lays desolate some helpless hen roost don't bother him a bit. This panther spreads a horror over the county. Dances, prayer meetin's, and even poker parties is broken up, and the social life of that region begins to bog down. Even a weddin' suffers, the bridesmaids stayin' away lest this ferocious monster should show up in the road and chaw one of 'em while she's en route for the scene of trouble. That's gospel truth. The poor deserted bride has to heel and handle herself and never a friend to unite her sobs with hers durin' that weddin' ordeal. The old ladies present shakes their heads a heap solemn. "It's a worse augury," says one, "than the hoots of a score of squinch owls." When this reign of terror is at its height, the local eye is rolled appealin'ly toward us Chevy Chasers. We rises to the opportoonity. Day after day we're ridin' the hills and vales, readin' the milk-white snow for tracks, and we has success. One mornin' I comes up on 2 of the Breckenridge boys and 5 more of the Chevy Chasers settin' on their hosses at the Skinner crossroads. "Bob Crittenden's gone to turn me out," they says. Then they p'ints down to a handful of close-wove bresh and stunted timber and allows that this maraudin' catamount is hidin' thar. They sees him go skulkin' in. Gents, I ain't above admittin' that the news puts my heart to a canter. I'm brave, but conflicts with wild and savage beasts is to me a novelty, and while I faces my fate without a flutter, I'm yere to say I'd sooner been in pursuit of minks or raccoons, or some varmint whose grievous capabilities I could more accurately stack up, and in whose merry ways I'm better versed. However, the dauntless blood of my grandsire mounts in my cheek, and as if the shade of that old Trojan is thar personal to suggest it, I searches forth a flask and renews my spirit. Thus qualified for perils, come in what form they may, I resolutely stands my hand. Thar's 40 dogs if thar's one in our company as we pauses at the Skinner crossroads, and when the Crittenden youth returns, he brings with him the Rickett boys and 40 added dogs, which it's worth a 10-mile ride to get a glimpse of that outfit of canines. Thar's every sort onder the canopy. Thar's the stolid hound, the alert fice, the sapient collie. That is, thar's individual beasts wherein the hound or fice or collie seems to predominate as a strain. The truth is, thar's not that dog a-whinin' about our hosses' fetlocks who ain't proudly descended from 15 different tribes, and they shorely makes a motley mass meetin'. Still, they're good, zealous dogs, and as they're goin' to go for'ard and take most of the risks of that panther, it seems invidious to criticize 'em. One of the Twitty boys rides down and puts the 80 or more dogs into the bresh. The rest of us lays back and strains our eyes. "Thar he is!" A shout goes up as we descries the panther stealin' off by a far corner. He's headin' along a hollow that's full of bresh and baby timber and runs parallel with the pike. Big and yaller he is. We can tell from the slight flash we gets of him as he darts into a second clump of bushes. With a cry, what young Crittenden calls a view halloo, we goes stampedin' down the pike in pursuit. Our dogs is stanch, they shore does themse'fs proud, singin' in 20 keys, reachin' from growls to yelps, and from yelps to shrillest screams, they pushes dauntlessly on the fresh trail of their terrified quarry. Now and then we gets a squint of the panther as he skulks from one copse to another just ahead, which he's goin' like a arrow, no mistake. As for us Chevy chasers, we parallels the hunt and continues poundin' the Skinner turnpike abreast of the pack, ever and anon givin' a encouragin' shout as we briefly sights our game. "Gents," says Colonel Sterrett as he again refreshes himself, "it's needless to go over that hunt in detail. We hustles the flyin' demon full 18 miles, our faithful dogs crowdin' close and breathless at his coward heels. Still, they don't catch up with him. He streaks it like some saffron meteor. Only once does we approach within strikin' distance. That's when he crosses at old Stafford's whiskey still. As he glides into view, Crittenden shouts, 'Thar he goes!' For myse'f, I'm prepared. I've got one of these misguided cap and ball 6-shooters that's built durin' the war, and I cuts that hardware loose. This weapon seems a born profligate of lead, for the 6 chambers goes off together, which you should have seen the Chevy chasers dodge. And well they may, that broadside ain't in vain. My aim is so true that one of the rarmost dogs evolves a howl and rolls over. Then he sets up gnawin' and lickin' his off hind leg in frantic alternations. That hunt is done for him. We leaves him doctorin' himself and picks him up 2 hours later on our triumphant return. As I states, we harries that fugitive panther for 18 miles, and in our hot ardor founders 2 hosses. Fatigue and weariness begins to overpower us. Also our prey weakens along with the rest. In the half glimpses we now and again gets of him, it's plain that both pace and distance is tellin' fast. Still he presses on, and as thar's no spur like fear, that panther holds his distance. But the end comes. We've done run him into a rough, wild stretch of country where settlements is few and cabins rude. Of a sudden, the panther emerges onto the road and goes rackin' along the trail. We pushes our spent steeds to the utmost. Thar's a log house ahead. Out in the stump-filled lot in front is a frowsy woman and 5 small children. The panther leaps the rickety worm fence and heads straight as a bullet for the clearin'. Horrors! The sight freezes our marrows. Mad and savage, he's due to bite a hunk outen that devoted household. Mutually callin' to each other, we goads our horses to the utmost. We gain on the panther. He may wound, but he won't have time to slay that family. Gents, it's a soopreme moment. The panther makes for the female squatter an' her litter, we pantin' an' pressin' clost behind. The panther is among 'em. The woman and the children seems transfixed by the awful spectacle, and stands rooted with open eyes and mouths. Our emotions shore beggars descriptions. Now ensues a scene to smite the hardiest of us with dismay. No sooner does the panther find himself in the midst of that helpless bevy of little ones than he stops, turns round abrupt, and sets down on his tail, and then upliftin' his muzzle he busts into shrieks and yells and howls and cries, a complete case of dog hysterics. That's what he is, a great yeller dog. His reason is now a rack because we harass him the 18 miles. Thar's a ugly outcast of a squatter, mattock in hand, comes tumblin' down the hillside from summers out back of the shanty where he's been grubbin'. "What be you all eediots chasin' my dog for?" demands his onkempt party. Then he menaces us with the implement. We make no retort but stands passive. The great orange brute whose nerves has been torn to rags creeps to the squatter and with mournful howls explains what we've made him suffer. No, thar's nothin' further to do and less to be said. That cavalcade, erstwhile so gala and buoyant, drags itself wearily homeward, the exhausted dogs in the r'ar walkin' stiff and sore like their legs is wood. For more'n a mile the complainin' howls of the hysterical yeller dog is wafted to our years. Then they ceases, and we figgers his sympathizin' master has done took him into the shanty and shet the door. No one comments on this adventure, not a word is heard. Each is silent until we mounts the big Murray Hill. As we collects ourselves on this eminence one of the Breckenridge boys holds up his hand for a halt. "Gents," he says, as hosses, hunters, and dogs, we all gathers round, "Gents, I moves you the Chevy Chase Huntin' Club yereby stands adjourned sine die." Thar's a moment's pause, and then, as by one impulse, every gent, hoss and dog, says "Aye." It's unanimous, and from that hour till now the Chevy Chase Huntin' Club ain't been nothin' save tradition. But that panther shore disappears. It's the end of his vandalage. And again does quadrilles, pryers, and poker resume their wonted sway. That's the end. And now, gents, if Blackjack will caper to his duties, we'll uplift our drooped energies with the usual 40 drops. End of Colonel Sterrett's Panther Hunt. Recording by Joe Mabry at www.ievoice.com.